Hi friends, welcome to Beautifully Bookish Bethany. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the best self-published and small press titles that I read in 2021. If you've been following my channel for a while, you might know that I like to champion some indie books every year. I think there are some fantastic things happening in self-publishing and in small press that don't always get the notoriety that they deserve. And so in today's video, I want to highlight some of the best books that I've read this year that are coming from self-published authors or from small presses. As a heads up, this is not books that were all published in 2021. These are just books that I read in 2021. So they may have been published in a variety of years. Some of them are newer releases, some of them have been out for a while, but they are my favorites of the books that I read this year. In terms of genres to expect, you're going to see a lot of romance on this list, but I've also got some sci-fi and some fantasy. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive in to my top 19 indie books of 2021. Number 19 is Blind Date with a Book Boyfriend by Lucy Eden. This is a really cute little contemporary romance novella that follows a couple who have a meet cute at a romance bookstore and have a whirlwind romance. This was just a frothy, adorable delight. If you're looking for a quick read that's going to be a fun, cute romance, this is gonna fit the bill. But maybe you want something a little bit meatier that deals with some heftier themes. You might decide to go with number 18 on this list, which is Sanctified by Maggie Blackbird. This is another romance, but it does deal with some more hard-hitting issues. This is one of the books that we read for the Indigenous Romance Read-Along that myself and Michelle from There Once Another Letter co-hosted throughout the year. So if you're interested in hearing detailed thoughts on this, we do have a whole live show where we really dig into the meat of what's going on in this book. But I really loved this. It is quite a steamy romance, but it's also a book that's really digging into the complexities of how Indigenous people relate to issues of religion due to colonization. It's also a bit of a Romeo and Juliet, star-crossed lovers type story. Our heroine is a recovering addict who comes from a family that does not want to see the Catholic Church have access to their community, and they're big proponents of following their own historical Indigenous spiritual practices and beliefs. Meanwhile, the hero is part of the other side of this community that have supported the Catholic Church being in the community. I do think that this book has even more resonance this year with all of the things that have come to light about these residential schools, some of which were run by the Catholic Church. That's been much more in the public consciousness in the past year. But this is a romance, and I really loved it. I think it is well worth picking up. Number 17 is The Flames of Albion by Jean Z. Menzies. This is by our own BookTube's Jean Bookish Thoughts. If you don't follow her, she is lovely, and this was her debut novel that came out this year. It is a hope punk academic fantasy romance with a sapphic romance between two women. It's also got dragons, and it's a very cozy read. It's definitely slow paced, it's intimate, it takes its time getting places, and it's nice if you're just wanting like a quiet, cozy book to read and you don't mind kind of like taking your time getting to know the characters. I really enjoyed it. This kind of hit the spot when I read it and gave me what I was looking for. And the ending, man, like she leaves us on a cliffhanger, and I'm very excited to see what she does in book 2. So congrats to Jean on your first book. It's a big accomplishment and very exciting. Number 16 is Damaged Goods by Talia Hibbert. You may not know this, but Talia Hibbert wrote quite a number of self-published romances before she started writing the more well-known romances like the Brown Sister series. And Damaged Goods is part of a series that she wrote that I have really, really loved. This book is a novella following a woman who is pregnant, who's escaped an abusive partner, and she reconnects with her teen sweetheart. I just thought this was a really beautiful story about love and healing, and yeah, it was great. So content warnings for dealing with domestic violence, but I was a big fan of this. I always loved Talia Hibbert, and you know, one of her books had to make the list. Number 15 is Queen Move by Kennedy Ryan. Kennedy Ryan loves to rip our hearts out with her hard-hitting romances, but they're all so amazing. This one was no different. Oh my gosh, this book. So this book begins following our hero and heroine when they had like a childhood crush on each other when they were like 12 or something. And then they're separated for many, many years and now are reconnecting, but it's messy and it's complicated. And our heroine is a high-powered woman who helps politicians with their PR stuff. Our hero is in a long-term relationship raising a child with somebody, but that relationship is no longer romantic and is kind of on the rocks. And yeah, it's messy, but it's good. It's hard-hitting. It's heart-wrenching. It's beautiful. It's super steamy. It's everything that Kennedy Ryan loves to give us. Number 14 is The Jezebel by Dylan Allen. Some of you who've been around for a while might know that the first 6 months of 2021, I was a judge for the Vivian, which is a romance award. It did not go great. I vlogged it. The vlog released after they announced the winner, so I'll link that up above if you want to watch my lengthy descent into madness. No, I mean, there were some not great books, but there were a couple of really great books that came out of that experience, and 2 of them are on this list, but the first one is The Jezebel by Dylan Allen. This was like, oh man, really good. I think something I've learned this year is I can love a hard-hitting romance that deals with difficult topics. Like, that can really work for me, and this is an example of one of those. This is another book that's dealing with domestic violence and abusive relationships and trauma in your past. But I loved it. Like, oh man, it was heart-wrenching. She has children. Oh my God, it was a lot, but it was really good. This is also one of very few examples of a contemporary romance with infidelity that I am okay with, because she's literally in a dangerous situation where her life and her children would be threatened by trying to leave her husband. So I like give that a little bit more of a pass. But heads up, this does include some infidelity. Again, a difficult, hard-hitting romance. I really liked it. It's also one of the rare examples of a more alpha hero that worked for me, I think, because the heroine was such a strong woman. Anyway, if you like that kind of romance with like the darker themes, this is for sure one to check out. Number 13 is The Bloody Spade by Brittany M. Willows. This was so good. This was sent to me by the author, and I just kind of devoured it. This is like if sci-fi and fantasy and manga had a melodramatic baby, it would be Bloody Spade. Oh my gosh, I was here for it. I mean, the drama is high. I really enjoyed this though. It's very twisty. It does get quite dark, especially for YA. I think this is considered YA, but it's interesting. There's magic, but there's a sci-fi sort of piece to it. There are lots of queer characters, including ace and demisexual and bisexual rep. I thought it was great. It was very good. This was definitely one of the best self-published books in the genre that I've read this year, and this one did come out in 2021. So I would love to see more people go pick it up, and I would definitely be interested in reading on in the series. Number 12 is The Road Home by Christina Berry. This is another one of those hard-hitting contemporary romances that really worked for me. This is another book that does something that I don't usually like, but by the end, I just, my feelings for these characters were so there. I am usually not a huge fan of books where the couple kind of hook up and get together physically early on in the book, but this time it really worked for me because it's supposed to be something casual, but then they start catching feelings, and it ends up being these 2 broken people finding love and finding healing, and it was so beautiful. Like, this was so beautiful. I really loved it. Our hero is a Cherokee guy who is in a death metal band, and our heroine is this like really cool girl who does roller derby, and yeah. This was so good. I was like, by the end I was rooting for them, and I just loved them so much. Really, really great. Number 11 is Lovesick Braves by Pamela Sanderson. This is another book that we read for the Indigenous Romance Read-Along. This is the second book in a series, and I really liked the first one as well, but this one was for sure a standout, my favorite of the 2 that I read. The whole series is set around the Crooked Rock Urban Indian Center. So it's about the urban indigenous experience, which I think is really interesting, but it's about these different couples sort of finding love through the process. And this one was really, really good. I loved the couple getting together. They're both really nerdy and have a lot on their plates and are financially in difficult situations. And so we see the reality of that, but also they fall in love, and it's kind of beautiful. I'm also very invested in the macro arc of what's going to happen with the center and them trying to find a new home. So I do want to read on in the series. The one caveat that I'll say here is that the steamy scenes in this are kind of cringe. So that That is my main complaint, but otherwise I really loved this. Number 10 is Stones of Light by Zach Argyle. I really like this a lot. This is the second book in an epic fantasy series by a self-pubbed author, and I just thought this book in particular really stepped up the game from book one. It expands the world, it does some interesting things with the plot, there's lots of twists and turns. I love what it's doing with the characters. I love the fact too that this is a fantasy book that's multi-POV but has several really amazing female characters who don't feel like stereotypes. They've got a lot of nuance and they're just, I think, done very, very well. There's a lot of humanity to the book with as much action as there is, and the audio narrator is phenomenal, like a pleasure to listen to. So this for sure had to be on the list. Coming in at number 9 is The Alien's Mail Order Bride by Ruby Dixon. This is maybe an interesting one. I know her book Ice Planet Barbarians kind of blew up on TikTok this year and got traditionally published, which I did read and I liked it pretty well, but what I've really loved from her is her Rizdiverse books. They're set in the same universe, but these books have marriage of convenience plots, and an example of that is this one, The Alien's Mail Order Bride. I just thought this was really sweet. It's a romance novella following an alien who does a mail order bride thing, trying to get a woman who is of the same alien species as himself, but instead gets a human woman in disguise. And she wasn't quite what he thought he wanted, but they end up falling for each other anyway. And it's really cute. I really liked it a lot. So that's why it's on the list. I like the campiness, I like the sweetness. If you haven't checked Ruby Dixon out, I think she's a lot of fun. Number 8 is from a small press. This is The Tangleroot Palace by Marjorie Liu. This was put out by Tachyon. They do a small number of sci-fi fantasy releases every year, and this was one from 2021 that I really loved. It is a short story collection from the author of Monstrous. And I just thought these stories were really great. They're dark, they're fantastical, and often feminist. One of them has some steampunk vibes to them. I just really, really loved this short story collection, and I thought it was really interesting getting to read her thoughts and author's notes at the end of each story, because there are stories that she wrote over a period of many years in different circumstances and kind of talking about where she was at in her life and what she was thinking and feeling when she wrote each of them. So I just thought this was really a standout collection of short stories if you're a fantasy reader. The next 2 books on this list are publications from Subterranean Press. If you're not familiar with Subterranean Press, they do these fancy, nice editions of books. Some of them are editions of books that have been published from other publishers, like they've done fancy editions of the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown and Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. But they also do original publications by well-known authors where they are exclusive to Subterranean Press, and there's only a limited number of copies made of these books. Usually they're novellas that are the exclusives, and they're pricey, so I have not purchased very many, but I have gotten a couple from my favorite authors, and 2 of them are books that I read this year and really loved, so this is counting as my small press options. Number 7 is Princess Floralinda and the 40 Flight Tower by Tamsin Muir. I should say with these, you can still read them as ebooks, and this one I know has an audiobook option as well, so those are available to the public. It's just that you can't get the physical copies. They were limited to a certain number. I really loved this. I thought this was fun. If you like Tamsin Muir's humor, which I do, it really works for me. I think this is a good time. It follows a princess who is put at the top of a tower, and she's supposed to wait for a prince to come and save her, but the dragon in the tower eats them all, and so she finally decides to fight her way down the tower and save herself. And I just loved it. I thought this was great. It was a really good time. Yeah, if that sounds up your alley, check it out. Number 6 is the other Subterranean Press book. This is The Return of the Sorceress by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, another one of my favorite authors. It is a little fantasy novella. I believe the magic system was inspired by Aztec mythology, and it follows a middle-aged woman who is a sorceress who had lost all her power and is on a quest to try and get that power back. I really liked this a lot. Her writing always works for me, and I loved this little novella. Coming in at number 5 is a book from somebody who has become one of my favorite romance authors. This is Teach Me by Olivia Dade. After loving Spoiler Alert last year, I wanted to go back and read some of her backlist self-pub titles, and this is one of them. I just really love the way she does romance, her heroines, the fat representation, and this was great. It has a prickly heroine who has a soft heart for her students. She's a teacher. This is in some ways a love letter to teachers. And we have a cinnamon roll hero who is a new teacher, and there's some conflict between them at the beginning, but like he wins her over, and it's so cute. It's so cute. I loved it so much. Number 4 is Nature Poem by Tommy Pico. I actually read this on the recommendation of Bear from Etu Brody for Indigathon, which was a readathon focused on reading books by Indigenous authors. It's a poetry collection written by a gay Indigenous man, and I really loved it. I listened to the audio of this from my library, and the author actually reads the poetry himself. I'm not a big consumer of poetry, but this was really fantastic. It was a lot about identity and the complexities of competing identity, especially as a queer person, about living in the city, about coming of age and figuring out who you are and who you want to be. I loved it. I thought it was really beautiful and definitely worth checking out if that sounds up your alley. Number 3 is a book that's been massively popularized by TikTok this year, and personally I think for good reason, to the point that it's getting traditionally published in 2022. This is The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. It is dark academia fantasy with morally gray characters and a lot of focus on ideas, a lot about the ethics of science, about philosophy, and I really loved it. I loved the characters. I loved how ideas heavy it was. I do think if you're not a big ideas reader, you're gonna probably find it pretty slow because it takes its time getting anything to happen. So that is a complaint that I've heard from some people, is that it's not fast-paced enough, but I ate this up. I loved it. This was totally my kind of book, and I'm excited to see it get traditionally published and see what happens in book 2. I think it's going to be really fun. So definitely worth a look. I read this for a vlog project I've been doing where I've been reading books that are popular from TikTok, from Book Talk, and then pairing them with books that some of you guys recommended to me in a video I did several months ago. I will link the vlog for this one up above, but I'm really glad I read it. I was a fan. Number 2 is Mangoes and Mistletoe by Adriana Herrera. Another one of my favorite romance authors. I just really enjoy her books a lot, and she does a mix of self-published and traditionally published romance. This was one that she self-published. It's a sapphic holiday romance with 2 women who have to work together in a televised baking competition, and I just loved it. It is short, it's a novella, so if you need a lot of time for relationship development, this isn't gonna be it for you, but I was a fan. I really liked the relationship. I liked the baking elements of it. This just gave me what I wanted it to give me. It was cute, it was steamy, it was fun. I was a fan. And my number 1 pick, my favorite indie book that I read in 2021, is the other great book that came out of my experience judging the Vivians. This is How to Stay by Christina Mitchell. And this book actually made my list of favorite books of the year. I think this is the only indie title that made it onto that list of my main favorites, but I loved this. It is yet again, like what are we learning about my taste in romance? But it's another hard-hitting contemporary romance about 2 broken people finding love and healing together, and I loved it. This made me cry. It broke my heart. It was so beautiful. It follows a woman who had run away from home as a young teenager and went through a lot of traumatic things and eventually became this big rock star. And now she is secretly returning to her hometown because her father has died. And while there, she is reconnecting with her childhood best friend who had a huge crush on her. They were each other's like first time when they were young teenagers. And what's interesting about this is that it's a book that deals with male eating disorders and like body image issues, which isn't something that I think we see in a lot of books. So I really appreciated that it dealt with that, but do be aware that it has that. Our hero is a guy who was always the fat kid growing up, and he, when she left, internalized that it was because of him, because he wasn't good enough. And so he now is obsessive about his eating, his exercise, and has a lot of like body issues to work through. So yeah, I liked the way that was handled and portrayed. I thought it was really good, and I just loved their romance. I loved their relationship together. It was beautiful. So there you go. Those are my 19 favorite indie titles for the year, self-published and small press. And I hope you'll go check some of them out. I think a lot of these authors don't get the amount of love that they deserve, and I think all of these are worth a look, especially if they're in a genre that you're a fan of. Talk to me in the comments down below. Let me know any of your thoughts or feelings on anything I talked about in this video. And for your question of the day, I would love to hear your recommendation for an indie title that you were a big fan of. Tell me a self-published or a small press book that you think doesn't get enough love that was really incredible. And if people are looking for more recommendations, check out the comments down below. Let me know. If you guys like this video, it helps if you give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.